Hallmark Christmas movies are films that feature women from the big city falling in love with their childhood crushes. It's usually some fella that owns a Christmas tree farm. Sometimes he's also Santa Claus or a prince. They suck, but they're great. But they also mostly suck. But they're also kind of great. They're good with the sound off.
Welcome to In Front of Ira.
We're Sabrina.
And Torsten.
Two historians.
And friends.
And lovers.
Of romantic comedies.
And this is the podcast in which we answer the age-old question,
will they or won't they?
Is it or isn't it a romantic comedy?
Technically, that's two questions.
Yes, I know. Everyone knows. It's two questions. Let's move on.
But then, never mind.
Anyway, today we're actually not going to talk about just one film, even though we are going to focus on one example. What we are going to do is we're going to talk about Hallmark as a brand and Hallmark Christmas movies, because as it seems, Hallmark is the place where you can still get rom-coms made in the year of the Lord 2023 and get especially like 90-minute tight rom-coms made. So we're going to talk about this in a larger context. And the example we're going to focus on is a very recent release, literally came out, 2 weeks ago on Hallmark, called A Heidelberg Holiday. And yeah, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, it's a romantic comedy movie / Hallmark movie. We're going to get into the differences, if there maybe is a genre difference or other differences. And it is about Heidi Heidelberg, who wants to go to the prestigious Heidelberg Christmas market with her ornaments, her Christmas ornaments, which she makes herself. She is located in Boulder, Colorado, and she has family from Heidelberg, so that's her backstory. And she can usually not get into the Christmas market because it's very selective. Except this year, there was a last-minute cancellation, so she goes to Heidelberg, ships her baubles, I don't know, like her Christmas decorations, ornaments, and goes to Heidelberg and meets a nice young man from a Heidelberg family, which happens to be the family where she's renting the guest house. And from there on, a romance develops.
Yeah, but I think before we get into this specifically, we should talk about like what Hallmark actually is and what they do, and how this one fares in terms of like the usual tropes and plots and whatever. So, I mean, Hallmark is a phenomenon that I think a lot of people now are familiar with. There's a lot of memes about it. There's a lot of like parody videos about it. There's even been a whole parody film by now because it's so formulaic, and especially their Christmas movies are what people associate with them. They've started to put out different seasonal entertainment, so there's now a whole slew of like obviously Valentine's Day, but also like fall movies, but they all follow the same sort of formulaic plot. I mean, I think it's also obviously known for being something that has very conservative values, like the brand having very conservative values. Hallmark obviously is originally a greeting card company and then has evolved into this like media production, not really conglomerate yet, but like a studio. Obviously there's a studio attached to us now, and it's really interesting if you look into the history of it, because obviously the conservative reputation has its reasons, because it has its roots in the American Christian television system in something called Vision Interface Satellite Network. So it was a Christian network, but it is no longer actually. So yeah,
it was rebranded. I think it was like 20 something years ago, like 2001ish. So Hallmark movies have been with us for a while, but also haven't been with us forever.
No, actually shorter than I thought, and it's sort of like confirmed for me, because I felt like at some point they sort of just existed. I was like, has this passed me by this whole time? But the thing is, it's not that old.
It's like the elf on the shelf thing where everybody pretends like this is a thing and nobody's heard of it until like 5 years ago.
Actually, like they only started to do Christmas programming after like several rebrands of the network. So again, the roots are in like the American Christian television system and Vision Interfaith. So Vision Interfaith had like religious programming from a bunch of religions. So it's very like integrated, like there was Jewish programming, Muslim programming, like it was, and then also different Christian denominations, Catholic as well, which for the US isn't even that common in many ways. But then the American Christian television system was purely evangelical Christian, which is usually where the fun starts. But then rebrands happened, reorganization happened in 2000, CEO changes happened over the years a few times. And so Christmas programming didn't even exist until 2009. And I feel like I was aware of this, like maybe have become aware of this, I want to say in the last 5 to 6 years more than anything. So it sort of makes sense if they started doing this in like slowly in 2009, but the full like seasonal rebrand of the kind of structure they have now, where they have like a slew of like seasonal programming and like this vast output of TV movies. They do like 100 a year or something.
Are you being very animated right now? Because I keep hearing knocks against the microphone.
No, I'm not even near my microphone. And it's a full seasonal rebrand thing. Doesn't happen until the 2014-2015 season. So it's not even 10 years ago. And also notably, they've started to be more diverse in their programming, basically since the last CEO change, but that is only like a couple years ago, where they've more like embraced doing a racial diversity, like not everyone is white anymore, even though that's a slow change to come, and have started to do also a few gay storylines, LGBT storylines, because in 2019 there was a big scandal about them airing an ad for, like the lesbian couple airing an ad on Hallmark, and then the backlash from like the Christian right being so big that they first pulled it and then put it back on, and then there was a CEO change, and now they're more committed to diversity. At least on paper.
They're, I mean, you can see this in most of their productions, and I've for research reasons and for reasons of having very long commutes and probably nothing better to do after a long day, I have watched quite a bunch of these now, and they are, as you say, very formulaic, but they do also have variations on themes. There's actually kind of two main ways in which you can become a Hallmark movie. A, Hallmark just makes the movie. There's almost like a classic studio system. I think we both read the paper by Andrea Braithwaite on Hallmark. Mm-hmm. That's how you become a Hallmark movie. And sometimes production companies will just, package a movie and try to sell it, and they will go, oh, this is probably a Hallmark movie, so let's try and get this sold to Hallmark, and then Hallmark takes the North American rights and they can sell rights to other places elsewhere, which is also why one of the problems that we keep having here trying to get, the Hallmark movies, if there's like a countdown of Hallmark movies in other places than the US, they're going to be scattered to all kinds of places because of that structure of production and of rights management.
Yeah, it's difficult to get a hold of over here. In the US, they've also, and I think that mostly speaks to the streaming system already not being viable anymore the way it started, is that in like a year ago they started to distribute some of their films on Peacock, so the NBC Universal streaming service, so that further even like splits it in the US, but mostly you actually get it through the Hallmark channel, which is a cable television channel, but then also they started to have their own streaming service app, but that doesn't work over here, so yeah, it makes it much harder to like actually get that experience. But obviously these kinds of like formulaic Christmas rom-coms have become so popular that other producers like both Disney and Netflix have started to do sort of their own type of Hallmark Christmas movie, but then also immediately sort of said, well, we're more diverse than Hallmark, we're more progressive in our values, and that is why you should watch ours rather than theirs.
Yeah, and also production value. They are usually a little bit more elaborate in terms of that. Hallmark movies can be really cheap. Not all of them are, but some of them, there are some articles that Canadian producers have been interviewed for that, and they basically will come out and tell you, if you can keep the whole package under $1 million Canadian dollars, that means you don't have to pay union rates. That means it gets even cheaper. And then if you sell that to Hallmark, because they have this thing that they call Countdown to Christmas, where they just like show new holiday movies one after the other, they need tons of stuff, so they will just basically take anything if it sounds and smells like a Hallmark movie, and if it's cheaply made, sometimes you can tell.
I mean, $1 million is not enough, I think. The Braithwaite article says $2 to $3 million.
Right, but there's a specific tax thing in Canada.
Yeah,
where
that's why they film in Canada, because it's a tax break thing. But the whole the whole shenanigans is usually $2 to $3 million, which is still very, very cheap. And they also keep them at those like 90 minutes, which also obviously then just means less. And they film them
right, and they don't. We were just talking in our other last episode about Love Actually, which is a 2-hour movie which had a 3.5-hour cut when it was first put together. That doesn't happen with a Hallmark movie. They shoot what they need, and then that's it. So there's not a lot of fat on any of this. And
they film them in like the Braithwaite thing says it's 15 days, which makes sense because like you don't really need more than 15 days of principal photography for 90 minutes if you don't
it's television like production schedules.
It is, and I mean those are all TV movies, so like that's sort of what they operate under. And again, they do it cheaply in Canada. And also the studio system thing is very interesting because the way they do this, like the old Hollywood studio system of the 20s, 30s, 40s, is that they basically rehire the same directors, the same scriptwriters, the same actors. And obviously that is also because when someone knows how to deliver the product they want, and it is a very like they have their own like script writing courses where it's like this is exactly the story beats you're supposed to follow. It's a 9-part structure, and this is exactly like this is when the first kiss is supposed to happen. This is when this sort of moment is supposed to happen in the story. And obviously, if someone proves that they can write to this formula and like hit the beats, they will get rehired because it's just easier than training someone else in this. But that obviously also again limits diversity. And then I think with casting, the sort of thing is that it is usually like there's some people that seem to be exclusive to Hallmark that you've not really seen in anything else, but then they also work with the same people who you will probably have seen in that one television show from the early 2000s or something like that. There's a bunch of actors that were on one longer running show and then maybe didn't have a lot of opportunities since. And so they get hired there because they have they also have a certain look, but they also have, they're at least, trained actors and you can work with them and they know how to work on a television schedule as well. And
some of them are also on Hallmark movies before they become bigger television actors because if you made it into a Hallmark movie, chances are somebody's going to see you. So that's also a thing. And there are some people who basically just kind of like the scheduling. This is a big thing that they are, because this is 15 days. You shoot the movie. It's very. It's 15 days. It's kind of television scheduling, but it's not a television show where you have to do this all year. So there's a whole bunch of people who really kind of appreciate that and who keep sometimes showing up in Hallmark movies, sometimes showing up in other movies. Rachel Lee Cook has kind of made a whole career out of kind of becoming the Hallmark movie person who then also kind of branches out into Hallmark-like movies. Lacey Chabert from Mean Girls is like the Hallmark face, along with Candace Cameron Bure from Full House. Those are the kind of people you see in these kinds of movies again and again. And there's kind of a comfort of like, this time she's a interior decorator from Chicago going to Wisconsin. This time she's a fashion designer from New York. Wait, no, with Sweet Home Alabama, going to West Virginia. Like the variations are limited.
Yeah, and I mean, you said there's certain people who favor the schedule. It's working moms, right? I mean, those are all actresses that are now at an age where they have one or several kids of a certain age, and they actually also just want a work schedule that is compatible with that. Like and I mean, I don't know what their salaries are like. I don't imagine them to be very high, but I also imagine that if you're sort of under the studio type contract, if your movies are doing well enough and you're easy enough to work with, you can probably renegotiate your salary. If you become like viable to the brand, they're probably willing to like renegotiate in a way. Because I mean, obviously coming just out of the industry strikes, we know how little residuals they pay people on streaming, but I would assume that because Hallmark started different and it's still cable, the rates might be decent enough, the residuals might be better. And now, obviously, after the strikes, all of this has been renegotiated anyhow. But I mean,
and it's not just that. If you have a reasonable, like not a Hollywood star rate, but you have money that you make, and you make a bunch of these Hallmark movies a year, and some of these people make like 3-4 Hallmark movies a year, that is going to cover a lot of your living expenses for a year, simply just from doing 3 or 4 of these. Especially if you just have those 2 weeks in like Montreal, Toronto, wherever they go. I think they mostly shoot over that side of Canada, so I guess probably also Vancouver because it's always that, but I think what I've heard is it's around Toronto a lot. And then, I mean, there's exceptions to this, and the one we're going to talk about in a bit is an exception because they did shoot it on location in Germany and Serbia. Where was it? It's Serbia. I think most of the Serbia stuff, I think that's the studio stuff.
Yeah,
I think they just kind of were looking for a studio in Europe.
But like the location was actually Heidelberg in Germany. And they do this with a few of these because obviously that's some of the tropes. And I mean, we could probably talk about some of the tropes because it's become such a meme potential thing, right? Everyone knows sort of what a cliche Hallmark plot looks like, even if they haven't maybe even seen these. But it's like one of the cliches, especially because from the more like cliche conservative era Hallmark film where it's like, girl from the big city returns to the small town and then discovers that either someone she never met or her ex is like someone who probably works with his hands, not in that way, but like is a woodworker or owns a Christmas tree farm or has some kind of business that she eventually has to like engage with, and they have to work together, and and she will probably find out that small town life is actually better. And I mean, again, that's basically Sweet Home Alabama, but like that's also it is a Hallmark trope because it is a romantic comedy trope before that. So they basically just take that, and the people that they're catering to coming out of this Christian network are still going to be overwhelmingly Christian people from the Midwest. And in our example, you can also see that. It's set in a different place, but those tropes are all there. Yeah. And I mean, I think, again, it's sort of shifted because they've started to diversify, because also they now have that pressure of like Netflix and Disney being on their coattail, and it's like, well, we actually have black people. I mean, not that that's great, but I think that it also speaks to larger industry trends specifically. I mean, me, someone who studies the Walt Disney Company, they at some point basically just learned that diversity sells and that they actually have an audience that is very diverse. So they will start to cater to them because it's actually a bad capitalist decision to not do that. But then obviously Hallmark, with the new CEO, is trying to do the same thing, but their core audience actually is a lot more white Christian than the cliche Disney audience. People always assume that is a Disney audience, but it's not been a Disney audience for a very long time, if ever. Or like not their core audience anyway. Of course it is also their audience, but with Hallmark it's so much more obviously niche that I think they now have to like retool what they're doing, and which is also why they work with someone like Cadence Cameron Bure from Full House, because she's an evangelical Christian. So they would also work with actors who come from that background, but I think that has shifted in the last few years. So more actors are also interested in working with them because they're not as conservative anymore, because as the cliche goes, a lot of people from Hollywood are actually more progressive leaning. There are some, but and then also being the diversity, like Luke McFarlane, who's gay and he's like out and has been in gay stuff. He was in Bros as well, but he just did a Hallmark movie, and I don't think he would have done a Hallmark movie even 5 years ago because he's gay, not an idiot. So, and I think he's playing a straight guy in this. I haven't looked super closely, but I think the love interest is a woman, which is also interesting, that is a thing where you now have actually gay actors who also still play straight roles sometimes. But yeah, so there's all these like formulaic plots. It's obviously also about like, again, like, career woman thing is actually bad. Like you actually like, you have to sacrifice your career, or can you make your career work? And obviously most of the time the answer, at least in the past, has been no, like there's so many more important things than your career, silly girl.
Although a lot of the Hallmark movies that I've watched, which are kind of like a lot of them are from the late teens and the 2000s, there's always the career woman who kind of makes her career work, but still then sticks around in the small town because she can like make that work. There's also a lot of single dads in Hallmark movies because who is more kind of eligible in that sense to become the romantic love interest, and these single dads always sadly have dead wives because of course they're not divorced, so that's it's completely impossible. So there are some very strict rules around this that kind of like add up to an sometimes written but mostly unwritten code for what's allowable. And that also kind of becomes a thing of production companies who make these kinds of movies going around thinking, this one is a little bit too, risque or different. We're going to go to Netflix with that one. But this one just has, career woman of the week leaving Chicago for Wyoming. That's clearly Hallmark. So
I actually made a Hallmark trope bingo. I mean, I'm definitely not the first person to do this. The Braithwaite article also mentions that, and I think and we can talk about this also with the way the Heidelberg film is written, but like I think they're now also have started to be sort of in on the joke of like knowing we're doing this formulaic thing, obviously, but also like actually sort of trying to be meta about it. But also, first of all, because a lot of people who like watch these also watch out for the tropes, have started to do drinking games about it and bingos and whatever. And I think like Hallmark is like starting to do the thing that a lot of conglomerates are doing, where it's like, people are doing this, why should we not also like at least lean into the joke or try to cash in on this happening? But anyway, I did my own bingo. I will definitely put this on our like Instagram and whatever, but like I think that sums up some of the tropes, because I based this on having watched some of it, but also on looking up some of the tropes again, because obviously there's also lists, because again, there's so much like fan and meta discussion. So my Hallmark trope bingo sheet has somehow we live together now. And I mean, I think that happens not every time, but like for instance, Heidelberg Holiday, she lives with his parents, or they stay in the same inn. Or, but like, obviously they have to be like,
they get snowed in. There's a lot of getting snowed in.
Then I have Girl from the Big City, which we already discussed. I have Mistletoe, which is basically just empty field, but, I figure like that has to come in sometimes. I have He Works with His Hands, but no, not that way. Again, like the guy in the Heidelberg, he does woodwork. I don't know if the other films you've seen, if there's more examples. I know the Christmas Tree Farm sometimes is a thing.
Yeah, I mean it's mixed. There's a lot of kind of people who are. I mean, the one that I live tweeted at some point on a delayed train was Christmas at the Plaza, and you have a little bit of variation here because the girl isn't the only one who's from the big city. It's set in New York, so everybody's there. But the love interest is a Christmas decorator, which is apparently a job.
Which was a super gay job as well, by the way, but apparently that's also not, again, rarely still a thing. I have, someone died, but a while ago, because obviously you're not going to deal with...
Can't be too sad.
You can't be too sad. So, like, if someone is a widower, it probably happened a while ago. Sometimes it's also, like, a dead grandmother, maybe, or something, or, like, it will play a role. Then I have meet cute. Well, that's a given. I mean, there's also a certain formula for how these meet cutes happen. The guy sometimes has to help her out with something. In Heidelberg Holiday, she's like getting lost or gets out of the taxi too early and has to walk up a hill with her heavy luggage, and he happens to come by and is like, can I help you? Then I have, oh no, we are way too different, which is not a thing in the Heidelberg one, but apparently they're also leaning more and more into the sort of enemies to lovers tropes of like, you know, the bickering and the going back and forth kind of thing.
Yeah, which we don't really have in this one. We don't typically have it in a bunch of the ones that I saw, which actually, and we're going to need to talk about this more. The reason these movies work in a certain way is also because they are, you know, they're rom-coms. They have to have some kind of drama because dramatic structure works that, but the drama level is so reduced, it's almost ridiculous.
I also noticed
nothing bad happens.
I mean, or the bad things that happen are not big, and if they happen, they're not usually about the relationship, I think, that much. Like, it's not that there's a conflict necessarily between them.
It's very interesting. Yeah. It's very interesting because we talked in our episode on When Harry Met Sally and Nora Ephron about, you know, the Christian tradition of romantic comedy in which the conflict is external, and the Jewish tradition of romantic comedy in which the conflict is internal. We have the Hallmark edition of this in which the conflict is just barely noticeable.
But it is external.
It is external, but it is external. Is it though? Because especially in the one that we watch, and we're going to get, I guess, deeper into discussion of that, because the upshot of the conflict is that her ornaments get destroyed, but she has insurance for it. So it feels very low key. It's certainly external in that sense, although there's also some internal stuff because she kind of somehow binds that to, like, I don't know. It just feels like they're.
But like it feels like, I mean, it is interesting. Then I have somehow there's a wedding, which is also not the case in this one, but it obviously, like, weddings are like these big showpieces that you might want to come back to in these films. It's not obviously necessarily the wedding of the protagonist. It's someone else's wedding, but it means like for a nice backdrop of some sort, and or like some big festivity. I have, oh no, I need help. Thankfully, there's a man, which is basically just, again, sort of that meet-cute structure of, like, Heidelberg, she needs his help all the time. Like, not necessarily in a bad or unrealistic way, but he's the local, and she has issues with her, like, post office shipping, and she does speak German, but not as well. But obviously, she does have to rely on him, and this is why they keep getting thrown together. Then there is he's actually rich or royalty, which happens a lot. Like, Netflix has also really leaned into this with their sort of take on these Hallmark films. They did a bunch of, like, I forgot what it's called, with oh god, what's her name? Vanessa Hudgens. There's a whole series of royal,
like a princess thing. Yeah.
And
a holiday prince or something.
If they go to Europe, that happens. It didn't happen with Heidelberg, but yeah, it is a thing. Netflix also did one with, like, Scottish Castle. Like, it's just that.
I saw the one with Brooke Shields and Carrie Elwes. It's insane. It's completely insane. It's I think there are 4 people in this movie who are Scottish, and everything is set in Scotland. But of course, also has that trope of he works with his hands because she meets him, repairing something at the inn. Yeah. But he's also kind of like a poor royalty who owns a castle. So yeah.
So yeah, obviously American fascination with, like, castles and European cultures that we're not even that invested in, but they are because they don't have it. Then there's sweaters on my sheet, which, obviously everyone has to wear Christmas sweaters at some point.
These people are so well dressed, though.
Yeah. I mean, I would say everyone in rom-coms is always well-dressed or in film, but especially in rom-coms. I mean, there's a whole fascination with, like, When Harry Met Sally, fall wear, and, like, generally, or Nancy Meyer's Kitchen, so it's more about interior design, but there's that fantasy of, like, just, obviously having everything so well put together. Then her job is something that is not actually a thing, which you can talk about. What plaza, Christmas at the Plaza, what is her job in Christmas?
Her job is her job is archival historian, which I did not know was a specific job description. That's just when you're a historian and you go to a
historian, yeah.
Right. You just have to be someone who does history and goes to archives, which arguably, or I guess mostly goes to archives, but it's these jobs they also have typically jobs like writer is a job. Where there's one that I watched with Maggie Lawson, which is there's a whole series, because that's also a thing that they've started doing, kind of serializing these. There's one about Evergreen, this kind of like Vermont Christmassy town in which a bunch of stuff happens, and you get like characters from former movies showing up. But she's a writer who just kind of wants to take a break, and then because she wants to do freelance kind of thing on her own, because obviously that pays so well. And then her mom, who runs an important magazine, asks her to write a story because somebody dropped out. And like anyone who knows anything about journalism and writing is, you don't desperately need a writer for these stories. There's so many people who will write them for much less money. It's just a completely unrealistic depiction of that profession as well.
Even again, not necessarily unique to Hallmark, but they have a penchant for like coming up with either jobs that just don't exist or versions of jobs that are completely like unrealistic of how they actually work. I mean, like,
I don't think either of us.
I mean, like, if you make, there's people who make they can make Christmas ornaments, and they might sell them at Christmas markets, and I get the appeal of trying to sell them in Germany, where obviously Christmas markets originate, and like Americans have a fascination with them. But then like turning it into like we can come to us, but like the premise of it is the prestigious Heidelberg Christmas market, and it's just not prestigious. Like, you have to fill out a form. They will pick you for the stall. You have to pay rent for the stall, and then hopefully you sell enough to make your money back. Yeah,
the way that the Christmas market is presented, and I guess we're kind of like rolling into actually talking about the movie, is that it's kind of like an Ivy League, you know, like you have to apply to get in.
Yeah.
The real reason why people don't easily get into these markets is not because of, you know, the quality of whatever they're selling. It's because the markets are usually pretty full with the people who are coming back year and year and year, and they take precedence. So is it realistic that she kind of like gets a last minute cancellation? I suppose it is. Is it because, you know, her application essay was so good? That's
you don't have to
quite the reason.
Fucking application essays are actually because I mean we're German, so it's very easy of us to look this up and know about this stuff, obviously. But like, you can just download the form for the Heidelberg Christmas market with the city of Heidelberg, where you fill out all of your things, and it's Germany, so it's mostly about bureaucracy. Like, if you put this up, it's an application form, because obviously they don't want everything to sell. They will probably look for a certain mix of like, that you don't have 20 different Glühwein, like malt wine stand, and you know, obviously, so that will be the thing, how they determine like how many ornament shops do we already have, how many Glühweinstände, how many like food, different types of food. So I'm sure that is mostly how they're doing this. And basically, it's just a form. You fill out your name, you fill out all your data, you have to tell them how big your stall is, because you build it yourself, right? You have to give them the measurements, you have to give them, you know, it's a business, and it's a business application. And
right.
they
and
tell
not everyone
you,
gets
like,
in, but not for the same reasons.
No, like, obviously there's a limited amount, and I get that, like, yes, Heidelberg is a place where a lot of tourists go, which is also why this film is set there. Americans are obsessed with it. Japanese people also in large droves come to Heidelberg. It's a big tourist destination. So I do understand that obviously that might be a lot more competitive as a Christmas market than a small town market. But it is still not like, oh my God, people from the US want to sell their ornaments there. It's usually family businesses. But anyway,
there's a scene early on when she talks about getting into the Christmas market, and then our heroine, Heidi. I was going to say I've forgotten her name, but how could I ever forget her name?
How could you ever
Heidi Heidelberg.
Her name is Heidi Heidelberg, everyone.
Yeah, she asks if she can like defer to next year. I'm like, what are you trying to get into Dartmouth? It's that's not how this works. You would send a new form. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you will apply again next year, and if you stalled it last year, they might give you the same slot again if it's available. It's just like, it is just, it's a business application, and they basically tell you what you have to do with your trash on the form already, because it's German bureaucracy. That's what happens. But yeah, so as for the, since we've started talking about as for the movie, so yes, her name is Heidi Heidelberg. She has German family, as so many Americans do, especially if they're from the Midwest. I don't know about Boulder, Colorado specifically. But generally, when we both first were made aware of this film, became aware of it, we were both very, very thrilled by the fact that she's called Heidi Heidelberg, and Jesus Christ, how much more tropey are you gonna get? But I think what really surprised me about this is the film makes frequently makes fun of the fact that she's called Heidi Heidelberg, and it starts to feel like they're in on the joke. So there is thing.
Yeah, this film is, and I think we kind of almost have to, look at eras of Hallmark movies. When did they become self-aware?
I think very recently.
And there is a scene really early on, and I watched this again today at the gym, which I don't know how I don't know how that looked to people, but I did. Sure. And there's a scene early on in the movie. On the second rewatch, I noticed that in the States, when she's still in Boulder, Colorado with her family, and her dad starts putting out Christmas decorations, and she says, it's not even Thanksgiving. And he says, my countdown to Christmas starts in late October, which is obviously a reference to the countdown to Christmas programming on Hallmark, which starts in late October. So they're very aware of, the kinds of jokes that they're going to make that are absolutely going to fit into this thing. If you watch it and don't know, it's a line of dialogue. If you're kind of in on it, then it is pretty funny.
Yeah, and they're doing this, and again, the exposition is sort of very heavy and very thick, but then once they get through that, and they do this very quickly in 5 minutes or something, of we established that she makes her ornaments, we established that she's trying to get into this competitive thing, even though that's not a thing in real life, but she's tried and she's failed, and that's she has all the rejection letters from the city of Heidelberg on her wall to motivate herself. And it's academia,
I kind of feel like somebody wrote this who is in a job where you actually get rejection letters, a writer,
who
obviously.
Wrote this? A screenwriter who gets a lot of rejection letters. Her thing is her grandmother's German, so what actually works for me in this film, what makes it work for me partially, is that they bothered casting Germans as Germans. Even her grandmother speaks German without an accent, so she's German, and speaks English also fairly accent-free, so she's clearly someone who's bilingual. And so we buy her, at least, because I know a vast majority of people watching this are not German native speakers, but it makes such a difference in terms of
they wouldn't notice. They wouldn't notice, but it really feels like they paid attention to how that resolves with the foreign language and English, and when people speak English and when they speak a foreign language. To me, that felt, as somebody who studies American studies and works at a department where I have to teach in English and kind of, is constantly around English-speaking people but lives in Germany. It felt incredibly natural, the way that they went back and forth and when they would choose. There was one scene where it didn't work for me, which was towards the end when it's just Lucas, who is the love interest, talking to his dad, and it's a very short scene, and for no reason that is understandable from the movie, they talk together in English. That's the only scene, and it sticks out so much because it's the only scene.
And I think the only reason they left it, I think they say two lines to each other in German, but the only reason is that it's a pivotal scene and it didn't want the Americans to have to read subtitles during it for whatever reason.
That's probably exactly the reason, yeah.
And that's stupid because otherwise, yes, they're doing very well. I mean, you should mention your partner is American, so you have this, like, this is literally the situation at home. And I mean, like,
it felt very normal because also the way that she speaks, like Carrie, like my partner, she speaks really good German, but with this slight American accent, and it's incredibly convincing that the actress pulls that off. I'm pretty sure she has training in German. If she only did this for this movie, I would be very surprised. Then she's incredible. She really sounds like somebody who can at least speak a little bit of the language. Probably somebody who in a production that cared a little bit less about that would pass for German, you know, in an English-speaking production. She's really good at this.
Yeah, and again, like, as soon as they are actually in Germany on location in Heidelberg, all of them are Germans. So the other thing that works, and this is how they pull off the thing that they do speak a majority of English throughout the film, even in Germany, is that the family she stays with is the love interest family, but the family is bilingual because his sister married an American, which also, again, is just a thing in Germany. We have so many American expats still, several generations of them, especially in a place like Heidelberg, which is close to like American army bases still, and
the American fascination with Heidelberg.
Yeah, and the university being there, and the university town means it's fairly international for a small place. And so that just works. So you can have even the German actors speak English with their German accents, and it works because it's just, it's a very realistic situation of like a American-German family over here. And also makes sense why his English is that good. I mean, a lot of Germans would be, but like, it just works, and they make an effort with it. And that's what I was really mostly afraid of going into this, like having to sit through a bunch of people who speak broken German, because that happens so much in American productions.
It's
and
funny,
not just with German, but
Yeah, this relatively cheap Hallmark Christmas movie does a better job at this than like 90% of Hollywood movies.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like
it's crazy.
We've made a bit of a shift with that. So I remember like a funny thing happened when I watched the newest Indiana Jones. I watched it in English in a German cinema, and for the first 2 minutes, I thought they put in the wrong the German version of the film instead, because it's all the Nazis speaking German, but accent-free German, because they cast German actors for the Nazis for once. And I sat there and was like, damn, did I go into the wrong showing, and did they put in the wrong reel? And then we get to Indy and he speaks English, and I'm like, okay, no, you just happen to speak the language. But like, they make an effort, which I think actually makes this film pretty good. So that's my other thing with this. I wanted to go into the sort of to make fun of it, and I think it's very easy to make fun of these films, and there's good reason. And again, but it's turned on its head by now that it's so meta that we're all watching these knowing it's going to be this way. But this actually so positively surprised me, because not only did they do well on the like German thing, they also actually, this is a decent movie. It actually has a 6.9 rating on IMDb, and I think it's justified.
For a rom-com is pretty good. I mean, you're going to get built-in audience on that, obviously. So maybe the 6.9, if you compare this to a movie that goes to cinemas, is more like a 6.2. But that's the average score for a rom-com.
And it's like completely inoffensive. Again, like the conflict is very low. So they just sort of casually fall in love with each other. His sort of internal conflict is that he's currently running his dad's family business still and doesn't actually want to do it, and sort of realizes through the film he doesn't want to do it. Then he confronts his dad with it. There is no conflict. They just make up and it's fine. Her big thing is her ornaments don't arrive in time because she ships them with some kind of weird magical service that intentionally delays it so she can be with her lover. But it's...
Oh, are you thinking like this is like the Angel of Christmas? It's a
Rowan Atkinson, service, and it's so but other than that, and then they arrive broken, and she does have insurance, but she can't really sell them anymore. But she ends up doing is like she has one display set, and she mostly sells her stuff online with a QR code, which actually is pretty realistic. Why would you still haul all of your stock to the thing because people order online and it's fine. So it is not even that much of a conflict. I think it's also more about then her trying to realize what she actually wants. And I think, like, I mean, we don't really know. The film sort of abruptly ends with them kissing at Christmas. But I think the implication is she's probably going to stay over in Germany.
Maybe they're setting up for Heidelberg holiday too. It's entirely possible. The interesting thing about that is that they basically combine their forces, right? Her broken bits of Christmas ornaments get put on his unfinished wood carvings, and that makes them special. And so, like, these two broken bits combine. And also, again, we're in on the joke. There is a point where he says, I think something along the lines of, there's probably a lesson here somewhere, like kind of like really pointing you at we're doing the thing where we're obviously supposed to, like, two unfinished people become better together, and it's,
so in that way it's a bit Nora Ephron Jewish tradition, but I think it's just so conflict low and so sort of it's so very like Christian tradition. Actually, that was never a problem. Before I go through my bingo again, we should actually talk about, I think, the actors and the writer on this.
Right? Yeah. The director. These people are all like Hallmark royalty, or like very experienced actors. They're
not actually Hallmark royalty, which I thought was interesting. So
I mean the writers and directors. These are people who do this all the time.
So the writer-director is called MacLeod Nelson. He's married to a Hallmark director, Claire Niederprüm, which I assume is where we get the German heritage stuff from, sort of, just based on her last name. So I think he's just so much around like Hallmark production that he's managed to like sort of write a bit of a meta version of one very well. He's also an actor. I didn't find anything super notable otherwise on his IMDb. Again, his wife is a director of Hallmark films.
He was in some kind of like not very expensive kind of like movies, kind of building his career. He was in something with James Marsters you can kind of see like but he basically, I mean, it's a family business for the two of them. I imagine that they're both Hallmark directors, writers, and they understand this stuff. So that's where that comes from, I'm pretty sure.
And so the actors, her name is not Gina, it's double N, Gina Claire Mason, which is interesting because she's actually a stage actress. And so I think you can tell, because the other thing is that obviously you expect sort of the very like daytime soap acting from a lot of these Hallmark films, which also makes them difficult, at least for me, to watch, because you have to be into a certain style of acting for these. But in this case, that's also not the case. These are two professionally trained actors that actually have a decent chemistry with each other, so they're actually pleasant to watch. She was one of the Glindas in Wicked for a while, so that's the big thing she did before this. And she's done one other Christmas film, but like, she's really just, she's from the U.S. South, but she lives in New York because she's a stage actress, which I think is interesting. And you can sort of tell, like, she does a decent job. And he is Frédéric Rossier. He's French-German. He's born in Frankfurt. And he also just, he has actual, like, actor training. He went to an acting school in Germany.
Yeah, they did a whole like round of German casting, and they got very, very good to solid actors to play everyone, which is I mean, for people who don't know, there is also not a huge German movie industry in which there are roles that are very creative for a lot of actors. So a lot of it is going to be, crime procedurals and, doctors in hospitals in very pretty places. That's going to be most of your fare if you're an actor on television movies in Germany. So something like this is very, very much easy for them to do.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing, right? I mean, you want to knock this, and you want to knock people who work with Hallmark, but then you learn it's just like, it's done in 2 weeks. They probably get a decent paycheck. It sort of puts them on the map, or puts people on the map again, or it's just an acting job someone can take that doesn't even want to be a full-time actor anymore. Like, I think we sometimes just forget that this is a job people have, and they want to be able to make a living of the job they have. And like, especially coming out of these strikes and finding out how little people make, and then also again someone being from the German industry that is that much smaller is like, stop making fun of people who take these jobs, because it is probably a better thing to do than a lot of the other stuff they get offered that would actually just be as formulaic. Like if you've been on the third Soko Leipzig German crime
honestly, this is the thing in terms of, if we compare these Hallmark movies to, the big budget rom-coms, and we talked about how those aren't really a thing anymore, but maybe they becoming one again, they're going to not be as well done. They're not going to be as good. Although there's also, with the fact that both lighting and camera technology has advanced to the point where you can shoot a Hollywood movie with like a $3,000 camera now. That's not really a thing that you see as much if you're not specifically looking for it. So these things are going to look good, and the way that these movies are made is going to be something that people don't appreciate how they differ from these like big budget rom-coms too much. They're not as high priced. They're not as extensive in terms of sets, but they're very well done. And not all of the big rom-coms have great plots either way. Still, most Hallmark movies, you can tell that this is made on a budget and made with like a limited amount of plot possibilities because of what the network wants. But as what they are, this I found better than like 90% of the stuff that I accidentally have to watch on German TV when I go and visit my parents.
Yeah, and also with, like, I mean, we keep lamenting this, they don't really make 90-minute mid-budget films anymore, which is most of romantic comedies. It's sort of stopped because studios are really stupid right now in investing only in existing franchises. And I think the Hallmark umbrella and the fact that then also again Netflix and Disney is starting to do sort of their own thing is the only way you can probably get a decent rom-com made right now. I mean, I think we're at a turning point where we might see more of that because some people are not smart enough, but it's indie. Like even Meg Ryan had to make her rom-com with an indie studio. It's Meg Ryan, and I know she's not been like famous for a while, or like she's not in things for a while, but it's Meg Ryan, and she made this with like her new film with Bleecker Street, which is a small indie production company. So it's like if you're a decent rom-com writer right now, you will probably try to sell it to Hallmark, Netflix, whatever, if you don't want to have like the Hallmark moniker because it's still sort of attached to like Christian, etc. Okay. But like you will probably try to set it at Christmas just for the sake of it, or like make it seasonal enough to get this done. You get anything made, and it is an industry problem. But then I think the upside is that the Hallmark type films are just getting better. Because more people are like, well, this is the script I have and I want to make it somewhere, and they're letting me do it, even if it's just on a 2 to 3 million budget.
And it is with any kind of restrictions, right? I kept thinking about this also when I was watching the other Hallmark movies. They are predictable in a certain way, although not in every single part. But then again, that's kind of what genres are, right? You're not gonna knock a Western movie for including Western tropes. That's just or superhero movies are incredibly predictable, super high budget, super expensive, very predictable in terms of what happens, very predictable in terms of what's possible, what's not possible, and they are doing a really good job of fitting into these strictures. Now, are these strictures necessarily necessary? Is that something in order to make a good movie, or for their studio to work the way? Who knows? But they exist, and I always appreciate people who work around restrictions and produce something that's worthwhile. And I feel often when you have streamers like Netflix where everything goes, you get 80-minute long episodes of television because nobody told them, guys, this should fit within an hour. So fitting within, like, okay, this is, you get 90 minutes, you get this budget. That means you can, reshoot one scene maybe if you need to. Everything else needs to be culled from what you have.
Yeah. And I mean, that also really, those restrictions are sometimes also, where like in terms of acting, like even a really good actor will have a bad take or two. And the thing is, if you don't have time to redo it a lot, this is sometimes what you will end up with. And I think that's also a factor we have to take into consideration with some of this stuff.
And I think it's
expertise of people.
Right. It's no accident that the people that they hire are often sitcom or daytime television or stage actors, right? Because those are the people who know that this is got to be redo right on the first take. If you work on stage,
it just needs to be there after rehearsal. So it's... Again, and I mean, like, people who've worked on TV and they're just like, it's just ideal. And again, it's like recognizable faces and sort of that studio system thing then. And
we haven't even talked about probably the actress in this that we both most appreciated before we know, who is Rebecca Emanuel, who was absolutely smashingly wonderful in a German kind of call it a German take on Ally McBeal. It's kind of the idea of what would happen if you crossed Ally McBeal with Moonlighting, and she was in like 4 seasons of that as like a really good screwball romantic lead. Now she's playing the mother, which I think gave us both a moment of pause. I'm like, oh yeah, time. It moves on.
Because the show is called Edel und Stark and it aired in the early 2000s. So it's 20 years old.
And if you speak German, if you have any, like, this is one of the, I've rewatched a bunch of episodes of this lately. This has no right to be as good as it is. It's just, it's a television show from the early 2000s. It was clearly made to fill a gap in the programming after Ally McBeal was canceled. It is incredibly well done to the T, and it put her on the map. She's been working steadily ever since, and neither of us have kind of like noticed, because a lot of it was in, television.
German things boomer television, which is very formulaic and very boring, unfortunately. Because the thing is, like 20 years ago when Edel und Stark aired, there was a moment, we had a moment at some point, mid-late 90s into early 2000s on German TV and in German film, where more stuff, there feels like there was more money, there was more interest in trying to create. Yes, we were copying certain things from, like, this was sort of a take on Ally McBeal, or Moonlighting turned into its own thing.
Yeah.
But like,
which is not it's not like the American Office quality. In many ways is actually better than the original in terms of storylines, right?
There was a bigger industry, and again, this speaks to the fact that more everything is global now, and that's actually been to the detriment of smaller markets as well. And but I think it's starting again. I think I'm sort of optimistic, starting to turn around, because what has happened with the existence of like all these streaming services, that every studio has their own streaming service, as terrible as that is, they started to invest in local production. So even Disney is now producing German content, like in Germany, with like German production, German writing, German actors for Disney Plus, which then obviously gets a bigger, and Netflix has done the same. So it's interesting to see where this will go. But I think, and then if Hallmark and all these people are starting to care about the fact that if they do actually do location shoots for some of their movies abroad. So they have, like, Heidelberg just came out, the next week is where we're still trying to get an interview. I don't know if it's going to happen, but My Norwegian Holiday, which was also shot in Norway. So you also
had Christmas in Vienna. You have Christmas in Rome. I think you have like 1 or 2 of those every year, where they're like, okay, let's up the budget, let's make this a location piece.
And they have a bunch of like London ones where I didn't check if they actually filmed over there, but I would assume they did. Which is clearly that this Christmas in Notting Hill
just as easily,
so that could be really interesting how this is gonna develop, because like the way the industry has been operating for a while is just not sustainable anymore. So we'll see what happens. But it's interesting. So I do want to, before we start to wrap this up, I guess, but like I do want to talk about my favorite character in A Heidelberg Holiday, which is the German post office clerk. And now I didn't write down the actor's name. I looked it up earlier, but he's actually a comedy actor, which makes a ton of sense. He's sort of a grouchy, middle-aged man who's sort of like very pointedly a German cliche of like the guy who works in the post office and is very snarky, but also very touts the punctuality of the German post, which, you know, at least they didn't.
I have notes on that.
Yeah, me too. But also, at least it wasn't the German trains. Otherwise, we both would have thrown things at the screen because our German train system is completely run down. But it's the German post office clerk. He's hilarious because he's also one of the characters that sort of help with the meta of like she arrives, she has to show her ID because she's looking for her shipment. Obviously, ID has this Heidi Heidelberg, which immediately is like, yes, I can show you my birth certificate, but I assure you this is my real name. Everyone is always like, oh, is that really your name? Blah, blah, blah. And the one thing he says is like, no, you know, actually, I'm not super surprised that this is your name because there are a few people around here who are called Heidelberg, and I've Googled this, it's true. I've also encountered it. It is a last name that exists, and, you know, given the fact that Americans love alliterations, it makes a ton of sense that your parents would have called you.
Did you know this about Americans?
Heidi.
I did not know this about Americans. Is that what they're known for?
I mean, it's true. Like, I mean, at least in film, you know, or in fiction, obviously, as well. So again, it feels like this very meta moment.
I thought there was like a comic book thing, but I don't know.
Yeah, but I think that's what he means. It's like, it's a thing he knows from American media, which would be his reference point. Fair. So again, it's that sort of meta joke of like, of course, you're the heroine in a Hallmark film. That's why you're called Heidi Heidelberg. But like he goes, and again, this is just for my bingo, and also because it fits in with the just mentioned my Norwegian holiday. He sounds like Jan Maas on Ted Lasso when he's like, statistically speaking. It's like, statistically speaking, your name is not even that rare. Fuck off. It's pretty funny. No, I love that guy. And I also love that, again, they hired a German sort of comedic actor for it and let him do the thing and sort of do the stand-up of Germany in a bit.
I mean, the thing that they're doing right is they kind of get the talent that like the people who are actually good at what they do, and you can probably get them for much cheaper rates than you could get like A-list Americans, obviously. And this is something that also kind of going back to our last episode on Love Actually, because they hired a bunch of actors from other countries, especially the Portuguese actors, and you know, didn't realize just how incredibly accomplished these people were, because they'd never worked with them, and they were working mostly in their own country. And this, I think they took full advantage of that. So like, yeah, we both kind of wanted to snark on this more than I guess we have done, because I like unironically believe that this is a perfectly decent movie to watch. Yep. Like, I would put this in the rom-com lineup, and it is certainly not worse than Sweet Home Alabama, right, which is a bigger budget rom-com, and certainly a little bit less problematic in terms of how it deals with history. There's one thing that I thought as a German that was very interesting, is that the grandmother, the great-grandmother, won some art competition, and they said she won it in 1932. And like, if you are German, or if you know anything about, you know, National Socialism and World War II,
not where you want to date anything German.
Because why do these people end up in the United States when they win art competitions in 1932?
Also, I don't want to be that person, but wouldn't Heidelberg technically maybe have been a Jewish name? But let's not go there. So it's, I do want to because I did this and we didn't go through everything, we can quickly check off how many of my Hallmark trope bingo things does Heidelberg Holiday actually fill. And it should be a drinking game, and we'll get you wasted again. I will upload this for everyone for the season. But somehow we live together now, yes, sort of, because she lives with his family, and this is also how they keep hanging out. Girl from the big city, not as much.
Well, Boulder is...
Yeah,
never mind.
Mistletoe. Is there mistletoe? I think they sidestepped that because it's also not really a thing in Germany.
We could go into like the weird way that German holiday traditions are presented, because I stumbled over that. St. Nicholas is a thing here. That doesn't mean you don't get presents
exactly
at Christmas,
like we
and
have
that Santa doesn't bring
Nikolaus
them.
and we have the Christkind at Christmas.
They've kind of like shoehorned like Dutch Christmas into Germany here, which I thought was a weird choice.
A lot. But at least it was all Germans this time, because a lot of times Germans play Dutch people play Germans, etc., etc. He works with his hands, yes. Oh no, someone died. I think this time nobody died. Her grandmother is still alive.
I mean, her great-grandmother, I guess, died ages ago, because that's how time works.
That's not important for the plot that way. Meet cute, stand-up meet cute of like, oh, can I help you? Because she is also clumsy and like tells the taxi driver, or like doesn't correct when she tells him the wrong house number, so it's actually way further up the hill. Oh no, we are way too different is never a thing here. They're always getting on quite well. There's not a wedding. Oh no, I need help. Thankfully, there's a man. Yes, that was their meet cute, but also he keeps helping her out, going to the post office, all of that. He is not actually rich or royalty, but his family also owns a stall at the Christmas market, if I remember correctly. But
the sister does, right?
Yeah. Sweaters. Yeah, there's some really good sweaters in this. I want all the sweaters.
This is a great sweater movie.
It's like
this
is
one of those movies.
It's like, yeah. Should look up if they used American brands or German brands above. Her job is something that's not actually a thing. It is a thing that people make ornament, but again, it's like super exaggerated about like the business that is Christmas markets. So there is a random competition in town. There is not. I mean, the Christmas market just it exists. Coming home for Christmas, not in the way
kind of.
I mean,
the
obviously,
grandmother joins her.
Yeah, it ends at least with the Christmas celebration. This person is way too famous to be involved in this. Not really a thing. I mean, Rebecca Emanuel isn't that famous. We just happen to know her from a thing. But she's
very well known. But if you saw her in a movie like this in Germany, you'd be, she's in a new movie.
But that is a thing that increasingly happens now that Hallmark is a big brand that has a budget. So you do have sometimes famous people in these films, at least in like cameo type roles, or or singers recording songs for it or whatever. So it happens. I think Cher, Cher has a Christmas album out, so they probably just scored a deal with a song she already recorded, but they saw that it's prominently featured in one of the films this year, for instance. I realize now what my true calling is. Yes, I think that sort of happens for both of them. Like, he's sort of, I don't want to run the family business. She's like trying to figure out where
happens
she fits
more
in.
for him than for her.
Yeah. American expat, yes, check. Merry Christmas in a language that is not English, definitely, like Frohe Weihnachten is being said.
That was my point of contention number 2 with the way that they handled language was that they say Merry Christmas to each other in the end, and they subtitled the German version. Have you watched this whole movie and not gotten and can't get from context that that's what she's saying? Okay, but
work? No, Christmas, which is a reference to a wonderful McSmeany's article we should link to, because it's a setup of how early draft a scrreenplay was.
Yeah,
like,
I remember when this came out Christmas? A couple of years ago.
Work?
That we kept sending each other texts just saying work, no Christmas.
Work? Christmas. I mean, sort of. She works at a Christmas market, and so does he, so obviously, legitimately, their business is that time of year, but I think it's still the trope of like, yes, at the end, they will focus on their family life and their private life instead more than trying to find themselves through their work, which I think is sort of her lesson here. Is this character actually Santa, which happens a lot, but not in this one? Probably also because it wouldn't work that well in a German setting where we don't have the same idea of Santa Claus. I mean, we obviously know about him, but hey, I know that actor from that one TV show. Yes, we could even do that with the German.
Probably most of them.
Yeah. Grandmother, that it's very important. Yes, obviously. There is snow as well. I put in here, nobody fucks and yet there are children, because again, these films are very chaste, they're very focused on like first kiss, nobody actually has sex in them, but obviously there's a slew of children of the sister and so on and so forth. So it's that very conservative idea of like romance where, you know, nobody actually discusses sex. I mean, not every film has to, but it's very clear that this is not a film that...
Yeah, I think this is just a thing that you notice when you watch a whole bunch of them, where like, yeah, not every, you know, romantic comedy needs to do things exactly the way that the one that I like does it. But if all of them do certain things a certain way, then you're going to go like, oh, okay, I guess we're never going to see that here.
Yeah, and I mean, that's still obviously sort of... That nobody even acknowledges the fact that sexual attraction exists is sort of, yeah. And then tall blonde man, yeah. He's not that tall, but he is blonde, so, yeah. I think it scores pretty decent on the Hallmark trope bingo. And then obviously the narrative structure will be sort of the thing that follows it to a T. But it's still, it's still enjoyable. And...
It's very enjoyable. I mean, I watched it twice, and I did watch the second one at slightly elevated speed, but, you know, it's perfectly, like I said, it's perfectly fine if you want to watch a Hallmark Christmas movie or just any kind of simple, nothing bad is going to happen kind of Christmassy movie. Is this going to be your new favorite movie of all time? Probably not. Will you be sorry that you watched it? Probably also not, because there are some real clunkers in the Hallmark lineup where I scratch my head and go, what on earth happened here?
Yeah,
this is just, it's a Christmas movie.
Yeah, it's a Christmas movie you can put on probably every year and be very happy with it. I find it less contrived than some of the ones I've in on Netflix that I've sat through. So I guess we just really picked a good one. We're obviously aware of the fact that a lot of the other Hallmark ones are much more difficult to watch. As we get out of the article that we read, which probably should also just link, because it's we are academics, and if this, you know, reading up on stuff comes up here in this podcast, sorry, we're not sorry, which really kind of dives into this and also makes it understandable of how all of this kind of fits together. Yeah, and sort of the Hallmark industrial complex, which is very interesting.
We should still do fake taglines, though.
So, but I said, I mean, is this a romantic comedy? Yes, because it completely follows the formulaic structure for Hallmark romantic comedies.
And it does try to be funny at times. Yeah. I'm not sure it always succeeds, but the postal guy
definitely gets the laughs. I don't think the two of them are very inoffensive leads. I said they have a decent amount of chemistry, but they're also not very funny or snarky people. Like, this is not Finn, Harry, Met, Sally. Fake taglines. I don't know if this one thing, I need to like double check again if this has a real one, because they do tend to have them. And I based my fake tagline on an actual existing Hallmark tagline
Heidi
from
comes to Heidelberg.
What is your tagline?
My fake tagline is, Americans always alliterate. Happy Heidelberg holiday, Heidi Heidelberg.
Okay, I can't find an actual tagline for it, but my tagline is, again, it is based on one that exists: when life gives you Germany. Because there is a film coming out, and I forget which one it is, maybe it's the Notting Hill Christmas one, but that literally has the tagline, when life gives you London. And I'm like, no. When life gives you Germany, which, should be a thing.
Well, it has given both of us Germany, and I think sometimes the people in the movies deal better.
Yeah. And, it is what it is. You can definitely try to find this. I'm not even sure, like, you can access it easily now in Germany. We sort of found a way to watch it. If you can come across it, or will come across it somewhere, you can do that. Yeah,
typically these things show up, like we said, on various streaming services.
Yeah,
just
Germany,
check where you are
Amazon,
and where you can get it. If you have access to it, it's you know, the thing about these is there are good ones and there are bad ones. If you're in the mood for a Hallmark movie, sometimes part of the fun is this one going to be decent, or am I going to start throwing popcorn, non-existing popcorn at my non-existing screen? And if you just want to kind of be surprised by that, then just watch any of them, really. Yeah. And it's fun to deconstruct the tropes. It's fun to see the same people again. It's fun when they get a little meta. That's like any genre. And in the article, Andrea Braithwaite basically makes the argument that they are their own genre. So they're not technically, I guess, then romantic comedies proper, but their own version of it. But any genre will have good ones and bad ones in the genre. And I don't think there's anything wrong with just going for it. Yeah, and if you can do it in a group setting and do a drinking game with the bingo sheet, then you will have an even better time. To like cite from the McSweeney's article about the early draft of Hallmark movie screenplay, which we will also link to, that ends with they hear singing. Mark pulls aside a curtain and looks outside. Mr. Boss and Abigail are caroling together outside on the snowy sidewalk. Mark, no work. Only Christmas. Jennifer, no Christmas. Kissmas. They kiss. The end. Which is also sort of how Heidelberg Holiday actually ends, because they kiss and then it's over. And if there's going to be a Heidelberg Holiday 2, rest assured, we're gonna watch that and we're gonna talk about it. Yeah, definitely. Anyway, that's it for this week. I will hit stop. Yeah. Merry Hallmark.